Good evening and welcome to the first ever Betfan live seminar. I'm very excited about this evening, and my name is Michael Wilding, and you may know me from the Race Advisor or the articles that I write for Betfan every week. Um, I'm very honoured to have been asked to host this evening's webinar, and we're going to be joined in a little bit by Simon Holden, who is a pro punter, and he is going to be presenting this evening's webinar and giving you all sorts of insights into how he became a pro punter and what he does to find his selections. Um, First of all, just a few things that I'd like to go through. Please make sure you've got a pen and paper to hand. I strongly suggest that you take notes throughout this evening's event. If you haven't got one yet, there's still time. Grab a pen and paper and get them to hand so that you can make some notes. Um, you'll see on your screens a control panel, probably on the right-hand side of your screen. Um, this will auto hide once the webinar gets underway. If you don't want to auto hide it, then in your view menu, you can untick the auto hide button, and that will keep the control panel in display. In this control panel, you'll see a questions box, and that is where you can fire me any questions that you want throughout the webinar. As Simon is presenting the webinar, I will be answering all your questions, and any that you have for Simon, send them in. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to have an FAQ session where you can ask him whatever questions you want. As you come up with them, send them in, and if I don't reply to them, it means we're going to come to them in the FAQ. If there's anything that needs to be asked to Simon at that moment during his presentation, then I'll interrupt him and jump in there and ask him the question straight away. So feel free to fire them in, and I will be looking forward to answering and chatting with you on all those questions. Okay, and without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Simon Holden. So, Simon, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and welcome to the first ever Betfan live webinar.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good evening. How are you, mate?
Very well indeed, thank you, very well indeed. I'm very excited about this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing all the advice and tips and strategies that you're going to be sharing with us.
I hope you are, Michael, and I hope you've got a pen and paper handy, my friend, because there's going to be some nuggets. So, thank you very much. Are we ready to go now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to grab my pen and paper myself and make myself comfortable, and I will pass it over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Michael, and get those questions throughout going, guys, because Michael's there, and we're going to, at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer session. So please, if there's anything that you feel you want clarified or you want expanded on, then make a note, and we're here to please. This is me in the Starsky and Hutch style 70s glasses, and you might be surprised as to why I'm wearing them, because if you look at the sky, it's actually very black. Now, this was taken at Goodwood this year in June at a night meeting, and I actually had a runner at Goodwood on a Friday night meeting. That was always one of my great hopes as a young person interested in horse racing to have a runner at Goodwood or at York, and I managed it this year. So it was kind of, this summer felt like the end of something for me, but it's actually the beginning as well. So what I'm going to try and take you through today is how you can get from being struggling at horse racing to being a successful gambler. That's the hope of this talk, and at the end I've got a very special surprise. So this is my pad. This is me in a dodgy flat cap, and This is where I live, and it's on the back of being a successful horse racing gambler. So what I'm hoping to show you today is what's possible from this game and what you can do, and what mistakes you can look out for. Now, over the next hour, what I'm hoping you're going to learn is various things, really. And it's really important that you have a pen and paper handy, because what I'm going to want you to do is every time I say something that I think is important, I want you to make a note of it. And every time you recognize something that I talk about that is something that you think maybe you do and is maybe a habit that you have, or is maybe a kind of dodgy thing that you might do in being an unsuccessful gambler, then I want you to make a note of it. Now, don't feel embarrassed, because I've done all these things 100 times over, and I'm going to share all the things I did wrong with hundreds of you tonight. So I'm the one who should be embarrassed. So you just make a note, and we're going to try and fix these, and we're going to try and change it to profit, and we're going to try and make some ground tonight. So we've got lots to do, so let's crack on. Now, what I'm going to tell you is how I went from the local bookies making me skin day after day, month after month, year after year, in a complete cycle of losing at gambling, to being one of the country's leading professional gamblers, top tipsters and racehorse owners. Now, that might seem a huge leap, but actually it's not been. And remember, the longest journeys start with a little step. So what I'm hoping is that tonight I can give you some little steps to start your journey to being a successful gambler. I'm going to reveal the secrets and the strategies that I've personally used to get where I am today. Now, it's been a 15-year journey, but I'm hoping that I can shorten 15 years into an hour, basically, and really kind of turbocharge your career. And then I'm going to share with you something that has never been shared before, may never be shared again. A really once in a lifetime opportunity, which is a phrase that's probably overused, but believe me tonight, it's genuine. But first, this is one of the horses that I now own. He's a cracking looking guy. He's called Fireback, and I'm lucky enough to be involved with this horse. And to be involved with horses at the highest end is just absolutely amazing and fantastic, because this horse ran on Derby Day this year at Epsom, and to be part of that whole carnival, that whole amazing day that is Derby Day, was just fantastic, and really kind of cemented how I felt the journey I've gone on in the last 15 years. And as you can see, he's quite a good-looking guy, and he's cool, and he knows it. And he's just one of the horses that I've got an interest in. But from owning horses that run on Derby Day to going home like completely skint from a betting shop has been my journey. And I began in a situation like many people, maybe like yourself. I'm thinking that the guys that have signed up for this are people who want to improve, and maybe are people who feel that they need an extra help, and they want to change to become successful gamblers. And I began in that situation just like you. Now, going back to the start, I've been fascinated by racing since the age of 16, and possibly before. I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up near the training centre of Malton, and horse racing was kind of all around me, and it was just like all enveloping, and it was just everything I thought about, from basically getting up to going to bed at night. And I wanted to know the people that were involved in it, and I wanted to know the owners of the horses, and I wanted to know about the horses themselves. I wanted to see the horses. It was just like, it was my thing. Now, as soon as I was just about old enough, I began to actually take that a stage further and actually bet on the horses. And I used to listen out for any information that I could get from people who worked in yards, from people I knew who were friends of people who worked in yards and friends of friends, and people who worked on the gallops, and just anything really. If they were connected in racing, I wanted to know them. Around about this time, I tried everything. If it was to do with horse racing, I signed up for it. I was the guy, who would just like be there. I subscribed to everything. I subscribed to every tipster service. Now, as we'll find out later, tipsters can be absolute gold. Now, Betfan, who I'm lucky enough to work with, they trial guys for 2-3 months to find out if they're good enough to join their roster. And 98% of the people who try them fail. So this is a kind of gold standard in tipping, and tipsters can be absolutely vital. And I tried everyone. I tried every phone service going on. In those days, there weren't email services. Show my age there. I tried Timeform. I tried Raceform. I tried Fineform. I even spoke to people at Sixth Form. You name them. At some point, I was a member of them. And things occasionally went well. And I had decent runs with services. And I had decent runs on my own punting because by then, 2 or 3 years down the line, I could read race form, and I'd watched so much racing that I became aware of good jockeys and trainers, and I started to see profitable trends, and I started to see patterns of things that worked well and didn't work well by the very fact that I was just like around the scene so much and watching so much. It kind of like just filtered into me. And I started to look at the kind of other angles of racing, and I bought books on breeding, and I became aware of sires. I started to learn about Sadler's Wells and Danehill Dancer and all these great sires and bloodlines that created good horses. And here's the first embarrassing thing of the night. I even bought the Channel 4 racing calendar for 14 years in a row. Now, let me tell you, if you've had a bad night on the beer following on from a bad night gambling, the last thing you want is to be eating your cornflakes with a picture of Big Mac and Derek Thompson staring down at you. That was my breakfast for many years, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if that doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. But despite all these things, for me, nothing worked. Nothing. Whatever combination of things I tried, one thing remains constant over the next decade. And that was a decade of trying every single thing out there. And that constant was I just couldn't make betting pay. Whatever I tried to do, I ended up leaving the betting shop with little more than, as they used to say on Bullseye, which anyone over 35 will have to admit tonight was their favourite quiz show, with little more than BFH or bus fare home. Now, this kind of losing and being skint went on for week after week, month after month, year after year. And bearing in mind at the time, I kind of thought that I knew loads about horse racing. So it was kind of a thing that made me feel dizzy all this time. But so it was. And after a while, it got to the point where I thought, well, I need to make some decisions here. And it was eventually a time where I thought it was put up or shut up time. It was kind of walk away from racing or find a way to sort this out. And so I ended up making a big decision. And it was a decision that was like a long time in the making. And I can remember it clearly even. And it was one day after a particularly bad day of betting too many horses and too many dodgy favourites. And I was leaving the local branch of Coral Leisure. I didn't even have the old BFH. And I made a decision which was to have a huge impact on both my gambling life and, more importantly, my wider life in general. And that decision was to stop losing. Now, if you've got a pen and paper, I want you to write those two words, and I want you to write them in capitals. And that's stop losing. And I want that to be at the top of the bit of paper, the notes that you make for tonight. If you've made other notes, then see if you can get some space at the top to put that on. Because this is what tonight's about, stopping losing. And I made a decision that I didn't know how I was going to stop losing, but I knew I was going to stop losing. And that's the decision I want you to make tonight. Now, I decided that the best way for me to do this was to take a break. And I decided on that long walk home, after all, I wasn't going to get the bus, that I was going to stop betting for 6 months. And in this 6 months, I decided that all the time that I usually spent betting, I was going to use the time instead to study what was preventing me from winning. Now, guess what? You saw the first two slides, so I'm pretty much guessing you know what the answer is here. It worked. And that's what I want to tell you tonight. If you feel you're in that first bit that I was in, then there's a way out, because it worked in spades. Now, what I showed the day I walked home from Coral Leisure with that decision was discipline. Now, that's the second word that I want you to put on your piece of paper. Now, discipline is a word that we'll return to. Discipline is if you were to ask for one word that successful gamblers need, then I would imagine that probably 9 out of 10 would tell you the word discipline. So please write it in capitals, underline it, circle it, do whatever you want, but remember that this is the key word. And for the first time in my gambling career, that day I made that decision to take a 6-month sabbatical, I showed it. And the first thing I did when I sat down was I made a decision that when we make decisions in life that are difficult, they're usually about things that we personally are doing wrong. And they're the hardest things for us to face up to. And I had to face up to that one at that time. And I realized that there was one significant thing that was blocking my success. And it was nothing to do with my views on horse racing and horses. It was actually to do with me and to do with my attitude. And that was a lot harder to accept than anything else, because we always look to blame other things and other people. But when it's actually us and our own attitudes, it's a harder thing to come to terms with. But if I was going to move forward in this, then I had to accept that the problem was actually me. Now, this kind of realization and this honesty that had taken me quite a few years to get to the situation, this allowed me to produce a positive change. And to do that, I had to face up to one excruciatingly painful, embarrassing fact. Now, bearing in mind that I was a guy that had kind of like floated around the horse racing scene and liked to think I was kind of like cute and knew the score and everything. But it turned out that the fact that I wasn't winning any money was kind of the opposite of that fact. So the excruciatingly painful, embarrassing fact that I had to sign up to was the fact that I was a mug punter. Now, I put that in capital letters because I was a capital mug punter. Now, from the moment I made that confession and I looked in the mirror and saw the mug punter staring back at me, I gave myself the option to change, and I gave myself the option to unmug myself, if that's a word. Now, here are some of the mistakes I was making, and I want you to remember that there's nobody else listening. So if you feel some of the mistakes I made are some of the mistakes that you've made or you are making, then just make a note of them. All I thought about was horse racing, and all I thought about was picking winners. Now you might think, well, hang on a minute, this was horse racing that you were involved in. Picking winners was the idea. But actually, the idea was winning money. The idea was never horse racing, and the idea was never picking winners. The idea was coming out with more money than I went in with. Now, I had no structured betting bank. I just went in with whatever money I could get my hands on or whatever money I had that day. I had no idea what a kind of long-term plan was or how much cash I was playing with. I had no control over how many bets I had each day. I would go in thinking, do you know, I fancy the favourite in the first at Newmarket and I fancy the favourite in the last at Newbury. And I would go in and the favourite in the first at Newmarket would win. And then I would have more money. And then I would think, well, I quite fancy that one or that one or that one. And they would lose. And then I would watch the favourite in the last at Newbury win with no money. So I had no control. I had no staking plan at all. I never gave consideration to the percentage of the money that I had that should go on each bet. Just no idea at all. I thought I could find the winner of every race every day. Something that every single day I bet I failed to turn into reality. And yet the next day I went in the bookmakers, I thought I could do it again. So reality never hits you over the head like it should sometimes. Now all these things above prove one thing. I had no discipline at all. And the other thing I used to do, which I want you to kind of stop doing and make a note of stopping doing, is I used to play combination bets that bookies created. For example, a Yankee or Scoop 6. And I want you to remember at all times that bookmakers have never ever advertised a bet that is good value for you to play. So when you look at their windows and they say, have a Yankee, it's our great bet of the day. Think about it. Do you really think they would be putting it in their window if it was a good bet? Exactly. The answer is no. So never ever do bets that bookies create. Lesson number 1. But do you know what? Worst of all, I used to chase losses on a daily basis, compound them frequently. What do I mean by that? Many of you will have been there. You have a very bad day and there is 2 or 3 races left. The last races are maiden somewhere with an even money favourite. Human nature tells you that you have to make right what's gone wrong. So you end up having an amount to cover what you've lost on the last favourite, and it loses. And that makes you in even more grief than you were before. That is chasing losses and that is compounding them. And I used to do that frequently. Do you know what? There are races 7 days a week, 361 days a year. We don't have to bet in the last day of a race of a day to get back our losses. We have to fight that feeling. And yet it's a thing that's done so often. And I would chase losses constantly. Now, during this sabbatical, this 6 months of learning, this 6 months off, this 6 months away, I learned a huge amount. Because for the first time, instead of thinking about horse racing, I changed and I studied the science of winning at gambling on racehorses, which is, believe me, completely different to thinking about horse racing. I studied so many things. I studied staking systems, the way that we look at the pot of money that we've got and we address the races ahead of us to win money. I studied on, I think a conservative estimate is 150 different staking systems. I studied betting banks, the idea of putting a sum of money together to bet with, where we place it, how we run it, how we monitor it. I studied everything to do with them. I studied profit targets, the idea that we know where we want to be so we can plan a strategy to get there rather than just betting in the dark. I looked at the exchanges, this incredible thing that's widened our whole horizons in betting in the last 10 years. I looked at back to lay, I looked at lay to back, all the things about in running, all the 101 ways there are of making money during a horse race. I looked at place betting, the idea that rather than picking a horse to win, we can look at a horse that just needs to finish in the first three. And though that might be reduced odds, we might be able to look at winning runs of like 15 or 16. I looked at all that. I looked at tote betting. I looked at the idea of not fixed odds, but the idea of pool betting, where if we look at horses that are bigger priced, we might be able to get 50 to 1 on the tote, where we could only get 25 or 33s on the traditional bookmakers. And I looked at each way doubles. Now, as I talked about bookmakers not advertising bets that are unprofitable, you will never ever see a bookmaker advertise an each way double deal. I can guarantee you that. Because an each way double puts the odds into your favor. So if you look at two second favorites that you think have a good chance of beating the favorite, but have a very good chance of being placed, and you double them up, if they're both placed, you'll get your stake back. But there's a real chance they both might win. So you would be playing almost a free win bet. Now, think very seriously about each way doubles and make a note of that. And I studied just much more, everything to do with winning at horse racing. But the most important thing that I learned, and it was the first major decision that I took before I came back to betting, and it's a decision that you must learn from tonight if you want to change to profit and you want to be a successful bettor. And that was the decision and the realization that I must know my enemy and you must know your enemy. Now let me be very blunt and let me lay it on the line to you, because tonight is not a fairy tale, and tonight is not about making everything sweet and innocent for you in this journey that you're going to take to become a pro bettor, to become a professional minded bettor. And one thing you're going to have to realize, and again, got to be blunt, the bookmakers are your enemy. Now, the betting shop, and increasingly their websites, that's our battleground. And let's be aware of one thing, that the bookmakers exist for one purpose. And that purpose is to relieve you of your cash. Now, please make a note of that. Because I think sometimes in the fog of the kind of battle between us and all the little friendly things that they offer, we tend to forget that. And that would help them if we did forget that. but they exist to relieve you of your cash. Believe me, they will christen your skip quite happily. And behind the cuddly adverts with Morris and Victor and the, quite frankly, appalling ones with Stan and James and the rest of them, there's a well-oiled, brilliantly organized machine that will take your money as soon as look at you. They have focus groups with 20 people on, working out ingenious ways to get you to come in with a free bet. That moron that shouts free bets on the adverts for Ladbrokes, we all giggle along, but how many of us then dip into the Ladbrokes site without realizing what we're doing? They are completely focused on relieving of us our cash. So what I'm telling you tonight, quite simply, is you have to treat the task of taking their money as seriously and as scrupulously as they do the task of relieving you of your cash. Your cash, your pie and mash, your Norton's coin, whatever slang you have for money, they want it. Now, I believe, and from my experience, that only with this militaristic attitude will you be a worthy adversary to them. Now, I've given you the drumroll bad news about them, but hey, relax. There's good news, guys, because with the right planning and with the right approach and the right systems, bookmakers, despite all their tricks, can be beaten. And you know what? I've got the house to prove it. And I know that because I've been doing it for over 15 years. Year in, year out. Now, winning punters with certain bookmakers get their accounts closed. And they get kind of like difficulties. Now, don't believe for a minute that you can't win at horse racing. And when you hear people say it's a mugs game, believe me, if it was a mugs game, no one would have their accounts closed. However, since the advent of the exchanges, Betfair and BetDAC being the most famous ones, the great news is you never have to worry about getting your bets on again because you can have whatever you want. Right, now I'm going to share my golden rules of betting. I made the decision to change and I studied and I came up with some golden rules and I'm going to share them with you. So this is it, guys. We're going to get organized. We've made our decision and now we're going to get to grips with it. Now, by following these rules and never breaking them, you can start making profits. You can change to profit and you can stay in profit. And the great thing is you can do that most wonderful of phrases, which is you can play with the bookmaker's money. And believe me, that's one of the sweetest phrases you'll ever say in your life. Now, my number one golden rule is you must manage your betting bank seriously. If you don't do this, then there isn't going to be any show. Okay, so this is just like non-negotiable. You must manage your betting bank seriously. Now, what I want you to do from tomorrow, I want you to work out exactly how much you have to bet with. Now, that might be for the jump season, it might be for the month, it might be for the next year. And I want you to keep this in a separate account. Now, you can open a special bank account. I wouldn't tell the bank what it's for, but that's your business. And this account should be used only for punting. Now, many of you like to have money in different bookmaker accounts, deposit accounts. That's fine. I wouldn't ask you to not do that or the exchanges. But what I would ask you to do is total up the exact amount in those accounts and have a ledger or a notional account of exactly what that money is so you can still play this game so you know exactly what you've got for punting. Okay, I can't stress this enough. It's vital. Now, you must keep your betting accounts up to date. You've got to record every single bet that you take, whether it wins or whether it loses. And you need to update it after every single bet. Please don't think you can do it once a week or you'll leave it or you can't be bothered. You have to do it because the bookmakers update their accounts after every bet. So you just must keep an idea after every single bet of where you are in this game. Number two, you must have a staking system. Now, a staking system is an idea of a percentage of the betting bank that you're going to have on each bet. Now, the reason we have a staking system is because it stops us from just punting blind in some huge jungle of betting and being scattergun and not knowing what we're doing. It gives us some uniform approach. It gives us some discipline, and it's absolutely vital. Now, you must implement a professional staking system. Now, the one I'm going to suggest you follow is the one that I followed for over a decade, and it's called the 2% system. The reason I recommend it so highly is because, number one, it's defensive. Now, I'm in this for the long game. I'm in this to be a professional gambler. So I need a defensive system that's going to protect me. Secondly, it's effective. It's devastatingly effective. And lastly, because it will turn your betting career completely around. Now, let me explain a little bit more about what the 2% staking system is, and then I'm going to demonstrate it to you. Now, under this system, once you've got your betting bank and you're going to begin, which is tomorrow, every bet you place is 2% of your overall betting bank. Every bet. And after each race, you immediately recalculate what your overall betting bank is. Now, that means that if your bet is successful, your next bet will be bigger because your bank has increased, because you've had a win. If your bet is unsuccessful, your next bet will decrease and be smaller because your bank has decreased. But you will always bet 2% of your bank, whether you win or whether you lose. And you'll become more successful. As you become more successful, you see your bets grow and you'll see them very quickly become much larger stakes because the 2% will increase and become a bigger amount. Let me kind of show you what I mean. Now, if you see the screenshot now, where we see the section that says stake, the first bet is £20 on a horse called Shallow Bay, and it loses. So our next bet becomes £19.60 because we've recalculated the bank. That loses as well, so we've got £19.21. Then we get to £18.82, which wins. Then we have 3 winners in a row, and you'll see our bank suddenly goes up to £22.29. So constantly and always our bet is 2%. Now, because this is new to many of you, I'm going to send you something very special after this webinar, so you never have to worry about implementing the 2%. I'm going to send you my own bet tracker that automatically calculates the stake of your next bet for you. So you'll never have to worry about implementing this strategy. It's going to be automatic. All you need to do is enter your starting bank, which is your choice, the race and horse details, and whether the previous bet won, and everything will be calculated for you automatically. You can play this bet, you can play this staking plan automatically without worrying. And I'm going to send you that in the email tomorrow morning so you can start tomorrow. Now, let me tell you guys, by adopting this simple but devastatingly effective staking plan, you'll be able to handle the one thing that destroys most bettors, that ruins most betting careers, that makes people leave tipsters, that makes people walk away from this game and think it's not for them and just be in constant frustration. And do you know what that is? It's something that even the greatest gamblers in the world have to deal with, even the top boys. It's, I didn't want to say it, it's the losing run! Exclamation mark. Now, let's look tonight at a vital way of surviving in this game and prospering, and that's understanding losing runs. Now, losing runs, the name which we never want to say, but kind of the elephant in the room. So we're here, again, like I said, we're not here for a fairy tale tonight, we're here for how it is and to make you a winning gambler. So we can expect losing runs at least twice a season. Studies of the most brilliant gambling plans in history still show twice a season losing runs. And you know what? Like earthquakes, there's often no warning of when they're on the horizon. Now, the 2% system I want you to employ in your gambling, it will not protect you from encountering losing runs. No system that has ever been created or ever will be can do that. But what it will do, it will ensure that you survive losing runs and you come out the other side successfully, intact, ready to move forward into more profit. Now, in a short time, the 2% staking plan will become the way you bet, and it will become a normal part of your betting armory. It's going to feel different because it's a new way of doing things, and we often, because of the way we're hot-wired, we get used to the way we do stuff, and even if it's negative, we kind of think, well, this is different. But if you just give it a chance, it will just become the way you do things, and you'll see other people who don't bet like this, and they'll seem the weird ones. And here's the great news, guys. You'll never chase bets again. You'll never feel that desperate feeling of needing a horse to win. And there's an old saying in gambling, when you need a horse to win, it usually doesn't. When you've got your last bean on it, it usually falls at the last fence or the jockey falls off. No, you'll just not be part of that, because within this staking system, all bets matter, but none that much, because it's a constant slow flow towards improving your profit margins. So when you employ this staking plan, you'll become an investor and you'll start to watch your portfolio grow and you'll be relaxed. Now, the third thing is to stop placing too many bets, to stop the scattergun, to stop the going in and thinking you can bet on every race. Studies have shown that most losing bettors have one ingredient in common, and that's that they all have far too many bets. Now, if you think about it, the more bets you have, the more chances you have to be wrong. The more chances you have to fill the bookies' pockets. And losing bettors have very few off days when they don't bet. Now, what does that tell you? You must slow down. Okay? We're in this to win money. We're not in this to be betting constantly. You know, we're going to buy some good books and appreciate there's going to be some days when we're not betting. Now then, we've got a system. We've got a staking plan. Now we know going into the world of betting armed with these two things, and we need some horses to bet on. So I'm going to give you my very top form reading tips for you to use these new systems and bet with. The one thing that is the most important thing in winning money on horse racing, the biggest constant over the years, is strong recent form. So please make a note of that. Now, by recent form, I take to be things that have happened in the last month. Now, some people say week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, but my cut-off point is a month. So I'm looking for strong recent form in the last month from trainers, from jockeys, and from horses. Now, by looking at that, I can cut out a huge swathe of horses and trainers and jockeys that are running every single day. So when I go into the bookies or when I look at a day's racing, if I'm looking for strong recent form, I immediately narrow down the field. So I make my task simpler and easier. The other thing I want you to think about and implement is to never back horses that don't win. Now, you might say that's one of the more obvious rules, but people talk about unlucky horses and say, do you know what? The horse was really unlucky. He was second. I think he just got blocked off. And the next time he ran, he was unlucky again. He got blocked off again. And unlucky horses sometimes have 4 or 5 races like that. And the thing is, they probably don't want to win and they're not good enough. And people follow them over cliffs. So we never back horses that don't win and seem unlucky. And we never back horses that are ridden by jockeys who ride very few winners. You see, there's a reason for that. And that's that the jockey's probably not very good, and neither's the horse. And racing, even though there's loads of trainers and loads of jockeys and loads of horses, you'll find that if you narrow down to the trainers that win most of the races and the jockeys that win most of the races and their horses that win most of the races, you can cut out probably 70% of the fields. You can cut out 70% of the trainers and 70% of the jockeys. So suddenly you're looking at 30% of the horses. And then when we look at 30% of the horses and 30% of the trainers and 30% of the jockeys, and then we add the constant of recent form, we narrow that down to maybe 15 or 10% of the potential runners. So suddenly we're cutting out huge swathes of horses, trainers, and jockeys that can't win. So we're making our task of winner finding far more easier than when we look at the huge swathe of things that are an option. So we then look at a day's racing and we look at trainers and jockeys who've had success at the track where we're running at. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I think York is the finest race course in the world. I would say that because it's my local track, but it is anyway. Now, one particular jockey called Kieran Fallon rides York far more successfully than any other person. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A, he's a brilliant jockey. Now, Kieran's had his critics over many years. Unfortunately, some of the things he's been criticised are worthy, but there's one thing. Kieran rides York better than anybody else. So when we know that, and when we know his percentage of winners is far better than anybody else, we pay particular attention to Kieran Fallon's rides at York. We look at the horses he rides, and then we add in our other ingredients, which is a trainer in form and a horse in form with good, strong, recent form. And what we're starting to see is that finding winners is a dartboard, and what we need to do is throw darts at it. And we're starting to throw 3 or 4 good, strong darts. So we suddenly are narrowing down what looks like a difficult puzzle. Now, the other thing I want you to remember is that we mustn't expect horses to do things that they've never done before. Now, horses are creatures of habit, and horses improve from 2 to 3, and from 3 to 4, and sometimes from 4 to 5, but not often. Usually at 4, they reach a pinnacle, and they may be able to repeat what they've done at 4, but very rarely will they improve on it. So let's not expect a horse to improve after the age of 4. Let's not expect it to do something it's never been able to do before. Now, when we think about handicap racing, sometimes the handicapper will expect a horse to do things it's never done before. So, for example, if a horse runs off a mark of 88 and it's never won before of higher than that, then let me give you an example. It's early in the flat season and a horse wins 2 sprint races. And it wins them well, and it's got good recent form. So we think, yeah, this has got a great chance. But it gets to a mark of 88, and it's age 6, and it's never won higher than 88 before. That's the time we should stop betting it. If it goes up to 94, then I suspect that it won't win. But what you will see happen is people will have seen it win twice, and they'll follow it in. But because we're going to not expect it to do things it's never done before, once it gets to 88, we're out. So we don't expect horses to do things they've never done before. Now let's take that further and let's back horses at conditions that we know they like and they act on. So we're looking for horses to win at trips they've won at before. If a horse has won at a mile and it's entered at a mile, and it's at a handicap mark it's won at before, and we know it's got good recent form, we're interested in it. If it's at 2 furlongs shorter or 2 furlongs further, and we've no evidence, we leave it. Now it may win, but we'll cut out loads of losing bets, huge amounts of losing bets. So we stick to horses we know conditions and trips that they like. We look at weights they've carried to victory before. And Jim McGrath of Timeform and Channel 4 Racing, he said that the ground a horse race is run on is the single most important factor. So if we have a horse that's won on heavy ground and it's back on heavy ground at the right trip with good recent form, we're interested in it. If it's won recently on heavy ground and it's only won on heavy ground and it comes out again and the ground's fast and we hear people saying, well, this horse won last time and I think it probably could get away with it even though it doesn't like the ground, we're going to sit that one out and we're going to miss out on very few winners, but we're going to benefit because there's going to be loads of times when those horses go on and lose. So we're looking for similar conditions in weight, in ground, and in trip. Now, moving on from that, trainers and horses are creatures of habit. And we look for times of year when they've won before. Now, all this information is available on At the Races, on the Racing Post. We can look for trainer files. I'm going to give you an example of a trainer called Patrick Haslam, who's now retired. Now, Patrick was a brilliant trainer, and he made a decision that in the month of January, he thought that a lot of his other fellow trainers were going to be on holiday or taking things easy, or maybe have their horses not fully wound up. So he thought on the all-weather at Lingfield, at Southwell, he could clean up, because what he was going to do was he was going to, at that time, which was the opposite of most other trainers, he was going to have his horses absolutely pinging, absolutely flying. And for about 10 years in a row, Patrick Haslam made huge profits in January. Now, if you were aware of that, you could be in on it. And the information was there, and he did it year after year, time after time. Another example is Sir Mark Prescott, who has his horses completely full on in July and August. And he does it year after year after year. So in July and August, you have a look at Sir Mark Prescott's horses. He chooses to have his horses fit at that time of year. He's not interested in April and May. So we avoid his horses then, and we look for the times, because he's a creature of habit. So we're going to be a creature of habit, and we're going to follow him in on those times. Now, some of the things I've just shown you are the ingredients that have turned me into one of the country's most successful gamblers and horse racing advisors. Now, I can say that, with no shame, because I've got the results to back it up. Now, I'm going to show you some of my results. Many of you will know me from my columns in the Betfan Daily News and from my service, PowerNaps. Now, PowerNaps has been going for nearly 2 years now, and has been just an incredibly successful service. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a a very loyal membership that's been with me for many of them the full 2 years. And some of those guys are making a very successful second income because in that time I've made over 457 units profit. Like I told you earlier, guys, this isn't a fairy tale, this is very real. Those profits are there, they're proved. And to find those winners, quite simply, I use the betting techniques that I've just shown you now. And I use them to find those selections every day. Now, we don't win every day, we don't win every week, but over time, we can beat the bookmakers. The bookmakers know that they can't beat me, they know that I can beat them. And the people that are in the service know that if they just hang in there, there's no problem because we're betting the right horses. However, there's been the germ of an idea for 18 months, and I've spent, with the backing of the Betfan guys, the last year making that idea a reality. And that's what I really want to share with you tonight. And that is to take betting further to the highest level you can do, to take pro betting to the highest level it's possible to be at. I spent the last year developing a network of contacts, and not just here or there, but in every major horse racing training centre in the UK. That's Newmarket, that's Lambourne, that's the West Country, I've got a guy in Scotland covering the best 3 yards, I've got the best people in Malton. I've been lucky enough that in the last few years, through owning horses and knowing trainers and being around, that a lot of doors have been opened to me. And we've made a concerted effort to create this network of just the very highest level contacts. Now, you could do this too. Anyone could potentially create a network like this. But what you would need to do is you need to use discreet advertising. This isn't something you can put, on the front page of the local paper. You'd have to use word of mouth. You'd have to be kind of visible in the right training centres. You'd have to meet the right people. You'd have to network at horse racing events and at meetings where the stable lads are, where the trainers are, where the owners are. And only when you had these connections, you'd have to test them. You'd have to have a period of time where you looked at the selections they gave you and saw whether they were genuine or not. Now, it will take time, but if a network is created at the highest level, and that's what it's taken me a number of years to get a network at the highest level and at the corners of racing that you don't see. It's a way to make incredible profits. I'm talking about life-changing sums. Now, you don't have to do that. I've been on a 15-year journey. I've been on a 1-year journey to create this, looking at nothing else. And for the first time ever, I'm going to give you the chance to use this incredible personal inside information network that I've created. Now, no one else is ever going to see this because this is a finite offer, believe me. Now, you join me on this webinar and I help you, and you're going to become a more professional bettor because of the things you've heard. But you have a unique chance to go to the next level and to join my new Stable Line Gold service that's been a year in development. Now, on this service, because I've got people at the highest level in each training center, every single bet that we're going to do, and I envisage there's going to be about 4 top level bets a week, is going to be a maximum strength bet. The reason it's a maximum strength bet is because I have the chance to cross-reference information, because I have people in Newmarket, and if I have a horse that's fancied in Newmarket, I can work out from the other training centres and from my informants whether there's a horse to beat it. So quite literally, it's from the horse's mouth, it's from the training centre's mouth. And the top level bets are often decided by people late in the day, after the betting shows have gone up, after the bookmakers have gone up, And I'm going to make a commitment for everyone. I'm going to give 75 spaces for this all new service. The reason I'm limiting in it is because I'm going to have to limit prices so we can all get on. But also is I'm going to work with the people that join me on this, and I'm going to help them change to profit. They're going to get my email. They're going to get support. They're going to, if they need telephone support, I'm going to be there for them. So this is a chance to have something that very few people get, which is racing information at the highest level. Now, hopefully tonight you've had some things that are going to help you move from where you're stuck at to being a winning racehorse gambler. And I urge you to go to this link, stablelandgold.com, and think very seriously and join me, because we're going to platform with profit written all over it. And I would like you to be one of the 75 if you can do it. We're going to have a fantastic new service. So I hope you've enjoyed tonight, and I hope there's some questions. And I'll take you back to Michael.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That's great. Um, yeah, absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's some excellent nuggets that have come out there. We got a whole load of questions here that I'd like to go through now. Um, while
Sure.
people are checking out that link, the link's in the chat as well. If you just want to click on it. Um, right, let's take a look at some of these questions. Okay, so a question here from Rob is he says that in-running prices are a bit of a mystery to him, particularly over the flat and short distance races. Um, how do people get their prices in, and obviously why are they changing so quickly? How do people get their prices in so quickly to get matched?
If you're talking about in-running betting on sprints, which I suspect Rob is, then I would say that he's probably better not doing it unless he has a mega fast internet connection. Now, there are various shops that do super fast broadband connections for people and stuff like that, but sprint racing in running is the equivalent of, oh, you know, short-term share options. It's just like very, 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 very dodgy stuff. So I
Yeah.
would say in sprint races, just be careful, Rob.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that as well, to be honest. It's
I don't
you
want to be negative, you know. I mean, in running betting is
no.
great,
I mean,
but
you're up against the guys on the phones who are watching the races and feeding back straight to players who've got very high speed connections straight into the servers.
let,
So
let me tell you a little story there, Rob. I was at Thirsk this show, and anyone else who wants to hear it, but I was at Thirsk this year, and one of my horses was running, and a guy was at the winning post at Thirsk with a MacBook uh, trading the 5 furlong sprint. And the 5 furlong sprint, a horse tried to make all and led for 4.5 furlongs, and then fell in a bit of a heap, and a horse came by it and did it on the line. Now, this guy was stood at the winning post with a MacBook, betting live and running. Now, you think about 1, 2 seconds, you click your fingers, but if you think about that in a horse race, a myriad of things can happen. So, if you're going to trade, look at the national hunt or look at the longer races and
uh,
check what time lag you're playing at, because it's vital.
yeah, that's a good tip. Time lag. Right, I'm going to move on because we got a whole load of questions to get through here. Um, So, will Stableline Gold Tips be part of the 2% staking system, or will you recommend a higher stake? Asks Raymond.
I would say on that, Raymond, that it kind of depends on the amount of money you're playing with. I mean, I'm looking for guys that want to have a few quid on, but if you have a reasonable betting bank, I would play the 2% because through time you'll see that grow. So,
Brilliant. I mean, it's a solid
yeah,
staking plan, is what you're saying.
yeah, it's a solid staking plan and it's a plan that works. So, yeah, by all means.
Okay, great. Okay, from John, is would you say laying favourites um is a long-term profitable strategy?
Lane favourites blind is the Q to winning nothing, but it's the Q to losing nothing. So we look at 38% to 40% of favourites winning. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah, I would say that's about right.
Roughly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
about
so if you're going to
30%.
lay, the exchanges are so cute now that they will work out the exact price a favourite should be. So if you lay it, by definition, you will win nothing or lose nothing. So what I would do is bring the things I've talked about tonight as in recent form. And if you have a favourite with strong recent form, if you have a favourite with a handicap mark it's won at before that you think it can do it again and it's on the right ground, don't lay it, back it. If it's not and you've got other variables, lay it. Then immediately you're putting the odds into your favour.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, question from Chris. How do you filter the information out? Because he gets bombarded with information. He's finding it's far too much. And yeah, how do you have any? I think the focus of this question is, to be honest, are there any particular sites you use for your information, or any information you specifically focus on?
In terms of working out form, I would say that there's a whole host of sources you can use. Some people prefer time form because of the way they personally look at form. Some people prefer race form or smarter sig or a whole host of things. I think race form is the strongest form site. But I know you don't agree with that, Michael, or you might have a different idea. But yeah, but it suits the way that I personally look at racing. But I then bring in filters that I've created. So when I look at race form, I'm not seeing the race form that you would see if you logged on. I'm seeing the race form that I then filter with two, three, four, five added ingredients. So as a staple way of looking at form, I think race form is excellent. But people love time form. People say that when time form was bought out by Betfair, it's not as good. That's an argument that's probably true. I don't know, but I would say that on balance, race form. But to be honest, form is only as good as what you do with it.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, I use factors. I'm a big factor man. I use a lot of factors, my own database. So I approach it slightly differently from you. But both, obviously both ways are totally valid. Um, and both work well. And as you say, it's what you do with it as opposed to what you're getting. It's about using it in a different way to the majority of people.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Um,
I always think that the best way of looking at racing is that somebody once said it's like every race is like a puzzle where there are clues, a bit like a Sherlock Holmes murder mystery or what was the Agatha Christie one, Poirot, where there are various suspects, and what you've got to do is follow the strong clues, and eventually you find the kind of thing where he gets them all together in the ballroom at 8 o'clock and says who did it. And if you follow the right clues, you won't always be right, but you will be right more often than not. So you've got to work
Absolutely.
out what are the strong clues as to who the murderer is.
Okay, I'm going to push on because we have a lot of questions here. I'm going to say now, I'm going to go through as many as possible, but we're never going to be able to answer all these questions, guys. There's someone who is now on the line who is going to be answering um, some that can be answered just straight to you by text, and we're going to answer as many as we can. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Here's a great question from Darren. I'm still convinced that horse racing is fixed, but if you can get away from betting on favourites and punting on anything over 10 to 1, I think you stand a better chance of hitting. Do you have any thoughts on this?
You're a conspiracy theorist, Darren, is my thought on it. Yeah, if horse racing was fixed, like many conspiracies, there would have to be so many people in on it that one of them would blab. Now, that isn't to say that naughty people are not connected, as wherever there is money, there are naughty people. But horse racing in this country is as clean as it's been for 50 years. So if you work out the right horse, pretty much you'll be all right, my friend.
Absolutely. I think it's uh, there's always a
And
possibility
of
of
course, when
fixing,
we
but
have a loser, we say it wasn't off that one. Yeah. And guess what? I'm the same. Yeah.
um, what do you think about having a plus £10 rule in a system? I.e., there's no bet if the horse carries more than £10 from its last win, because this could be overpowering for the horse in terms of extra weight.
The problem with any system such as that is it doesn't bring into account the fact that the other horses in the race might be rubbish. So if you say, right, that horse won by 25 lengths and the handicapper's clobbered it, he's put it up £14. Oh my God, it'll never win on that. And it goes back to the same track and it runs against four horses that have no form at all, then it'll win again. So you have to be very careful with putting finite things in. However, getting back to what I said, in the long run, you are better having cut-off points. Now, remember what I said. If you say, right, this horse has won off 92, it went up to 98, and then it slowly came back to 92. I'm going to bet it again when it gets back to 92. Now, it might win off 94, but I know in the long run, I am better sticking to the mark it's won off before. So I'm not saying that I'm going to, not miss out on winners. What I'm going to say is that in the long run, I'm going to be with horses that are stable at marks. So that type of system that you're saying, it doesn't take into account the other horses in the race. But what you have to do is you've got to have a cut-off point where you're comfortable with a horse. So if you think that that's too much, has gone up, then by all means, quit the horse. I would
Yeah,
agree with that.
I do as
And you'll
well.
miss out on some winners, but you'll miss out on a hell of a lot of losers.
This is something as well where we fall into the in the UK we have the problem where it's not declared the actual weight of the horse like it is in other countries. If we knew the weight of the horse, then you'd actually be able to make a very accurate assessment as to how much weight that horse is likely to carry, based on anaerobic energy and speed ratings. Um,
Michael, that
before it
reminds
starts
me
to
of the
slow
phrase,
down.
yeah, it reminds me of the phrase that Anthony Ross, the great American gambler, came over, and he came over to England for a year for a CBS documentary to try and win £100,000. And he went home after 6 months and said, "You guys bet blind over here," you know, because there's certain information that in American tracks are regarded as just being the way you have to behave that here we just don't have. But I would say that we can still find winners over here.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now we've got quite a
Mm.
few questions here about your 2% staking plan. Um, I should let you know as well that I've just been told 25 of the 75 spaces have gone. So if you're interested in Simon's stable line service, then take a look now. Um, so yeah, your 2% staking plan. I'm gonna roll quite a few questions here into one.
Sure.
Um, Essentially with 2%, how would you stake it in a number of situations? If you've got an each way bet, um, if you've got more than one selection in a race, and why 2%? Why not 3, 4, 5, 6%?
Well, that's a very good question. Right? And as I say, I studied 150, I think it was 153, I think 150 more. It was 153 on my notes. And if you get to 3%, you're getting a little bit naughty because you can have a crucifying losing run and you can be betting about 10 pence. So 2% is enough to make it viable for big profits, but it's a defensive protective staking. And if you want an each way bet, you have 1% each way. So you're always having 2%. So if you fancy something each way, if you want more than one bet in a race, then what you could do is combine the horses so that the bet, the stake, is 2% of your bank. So it's possible. It's up to you to kind of describe how you do that. For instance, if you strongly fancy the favourite, but you've got a sneak for an outsider, I would be looking at having 1.6 to 1.7% on the Jolly and the rest on the outsider. Um, I personally would stick to races where you only fancy one in a race anyway, to do with this staking plan. So, but if you do fancy two, it's possible to do it. You just got to split your stake, so it's 2% in total.
Yeah.
But the reason it doesn't go up to 3, 4, 5% is because of losing runs. So I said at the start, it's defensive, it's pragmatic, and it's protective.
Brilliant. Now I've got a couple of things here that I'd just like to bring out very kindly. Yeah, if I can find them now. Hang on. Uh, da, 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 da. Tja, do you know what? I don't think I can find them anymore, unfortunately. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Um, do you bet on all types of races, or do you tend to leave handicaps alone?
No, I had a phase of just betting on non-handicap racing. My guru, my mentor, was a guy called Chris Anzani. He used to work for the Racing Post and the Racing Football Outlook. He's still my number one hero in betting, and he doesn't bet on handicaps. And I kind of followed that for a while, but then I found out I was missing out on a lot. And I think there's a way of winning at handicaps, which I kind of discussed tonight, which is about protecting yourself with marks that horses have won on before, and looking at situations that they've done it before on grounds and recent form and everything. So yeah, I bet on handicaps. Yeah, I love maiden races. I love National Hunt Flat races. I love loads of non-handicaps, and I especially love championship races such as Cheltenham and King George and things like that. But if you miss out on handicaps, you miss out on a lot of gold.
Brilliant. I've got a lot of questions here from people saying they can't click on the link. If you can't click on the link, just copy it out into your browser URL bar and press the enter key, and that will take you straight there. Um, I found out the question from not a question, sorry, the little tip from John. Going back to the trainer that you mentioned, who did really well. He's saying Franny Norton, Kempton.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's Franny Norton at Chester as well. Yeah, yeah, Franny. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, Franny Norton, because surprisingly, he doesn't get many outside rides. He doesn't get a lot of rides yet. If yeah, the guy's right. Is it John?
Yeah,
You're right about Kempton. Yeah, I don't know what it is. The little fella rides Kempton well, but also be very, very aware of Franny at Chester. Chester is, if you've ever been to Chester, I was looking after have a horse running there this year, and my God, it's so tight. The horses are just constantly turning round, and a lot of jockeys are a little bit scared, may I say, and don't push the horses out. But Franny has a fearless streak in him, and he's. If you look at again, I'm going to be very boring here. If you look at Franny Norton with his profit at Chester, and then you look at his mounts, and you add in the ones that have got good, strong recent form and good, strong trainer form, then you're gonna do all right at Chester.
I've got a question here that I have to ask. Do you have any thoughts on Dutching?
Is that from Michael Wilding?
No, no, that wouldn't be for me. That's actually from Mark. But
I'm joking.
I,
I'm
I I
joking.
I know that you know my thoughts on Dutching.
Yeah.
So
Oh, no, I mean, listen, anyone who makes profits at horse racing, I take my dodgy flat cap off to. So if you've got a way of doing it and you make money, it's fantastic. It might not be my way of doing it, but remember that the 2% I never said is one bet. And getting back to the split stakes guy, if you think that the first two horses in the market, if you've got a 6 to 4 favourite and a 9 to 4 second favourite, and then we get out to 6 to 1, 7 to 1, 8 to 1, and you think that the top two in the market have got good, strong recent form, got good jockeys, got good trainers, let's keep repeating the mantras that I'm telling you guys, then split them. Go 1.4 6% the second, 0.6, and Dutch them by all means. The idea is you grow your betting bank. The idea is that you change to profit. Um, Long term, personally, I like to bet one horse a race. But that's a personal thing. Michael Wilding is, you know, uh,
Yeah, I,
not just my
I,
friend,
I,
but he's
I,
also a very good gambler and he Dutches, so that,
I am a
that's
big
great.
fan of the Dutch bet. Personally, I almost never bet singles, so I work completely
But that
opposite
is
to
another
Simon.
webinar, my friend.
Exactly, that's a completely different
Yeah.
thing, and
No, no, no.
so
Actually, if you want to bet more than one horse and you think it's strong and the horses have the factors that I've talked about, get out there and do it.
got a great question for you here. Have you got any ideas for Cheltenham winner tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I tell you what, I'm going to give you a little bit of inside info because you all hung on the line. You asked some good questions. There's a trainer called Fergal O'Brien. Now, Fergal O'Brien is an extremely shrewd operator, and this year, for some reason, a lot of very well-heeled owners have gone to him. And fans of Power Naps will have known that we've had a few winners from Fergal. And I can tell you that Fergal is going to run two horses. I'm not even going to name them, so you're going to have to do a bit of kind of detective work yourselves on this, guys. But he's going to run two horses in the bumper at Cheltenham. It's the last race on Sunday. Now pay very attention to the close attention to these two horses, and I would suggest now Michael Wilding will love this. He's going to be just like grinning like a Cheshire cat. Dutch them, back them both because they are both exceptionally quick horses. Now, Paul Nicholls, Nicky Henderson, Paul Webber, Venetia Williams, all the big players, all the big beasts of the jungle have entered horses in this bumper. Now, little Fergal O'Brien, and I don't mean he's a small bloke, I mean he's got a few horses. He's got two little sneaky bumper horses. Now, I suspect when betting opens on this race on Saturday night on Betfair, you're going to get big prices for these two bumper runners. They are both fancied. Okay, so another little freebie. Get
Okay,
stuck
so
into them.
go check them out, basically. Um, okay, so a couple more questions here. You didn't mention value in the presentation. There's a few people asking, what's your stance on value betting?
Well, there's an old saying, Michael, that every winning bet is a value bet. I don't know whether I believe that, but value is a concept that you could spend 100% of your time discussing and never actually reach an agreement. So once I have the factors I look for, or in stable line goal, once I have the info from the people that I know are embedded, I take that as value. Um, I remember a guy saying to me at York races, and he said, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, this is a genuine thing that happened. It's about 1998, and he was a guy who used to wear a trilby. He was a professional gambler, come up from Newmarket, and I saw him, and I'd been introduced to him, and he said to me, "What do you fancy today?" And I said, "Well, I fancy this one in the first, and I fancy this one, and I think that'll run well, and I think this one." I said, "Well, what about you, mate?" And he said, "I'm here to back the Guy Harwood horse in the last race at York." So I got my race card out, and it was the second favourite. And in the race card, it said 4-1. And I said, "Oh, that's unraced, that one. It's the maiden race." I said, "Is it going well at home?" He says, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." He says, "This horse is going well at home." He said, "If that horse is 4-1 in the betting ring, I'm going to have £1,000 on it." I'm like, "All right." So I went away and saw some people there, and they said, "Do you fancy anything?" And I said, "I've heard Harwood's is fancied in the last," which was true. And so we all had like a decent bet on it. The horse won at 3-1. Now we had a decent day, but it was kind of like bullied up by this winner in the last when this guy. And we were all stood in the bar having a few celebratories, and this guy walked by wearing the trilby. And I said to him, "Oh, mate, do you want to come and have a drink with us?" And he said, "I don't feel like having a drink." And I said, "Well, you should do, because it won, didn't he? And he said, no, 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 no. I said to you, if the horse is 4-1, I'm going to have £1,000 on it. The horse opened in the ring at 7-2, so I didn't back it because it wasn't value. Now, we'd all won a load of money on it. He didn't bet it because it didn't hit the price he thought was value. The horse won by 4 lengths. Now, I don't know if there's a right or wrong in this, Michael, but was he right not to bet it, or were we right to bet it because he told us it was fancy? That's a debate for another day. But all I know is the guy came up from Newmarket and didn't back the horse.
I think, I mean, for me, the question of value is that ultimately, to win long term, you have to be finding value. Um,
Exactly.
Otherwise, you
Exactly.
can't win. Whether you're getting value on an individual bet is a total matter of opinion, because
Exactly.
there's no
And
way
and
of
it's one
knowing.
that can send you dizzy.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's one that can send
absolutely.
you dizzy.
I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, there's no way of knowing for absolute sure if you're getting value, but all you can do is to look at your bets over a period of time and say, are they winning more often than my average odds? So if your average odds indicate you should be winning 20%, but you're winning 28%, then in the long term you're finding value and you're likely to be profitable. So
And
that's the way I look
ultimately,
at it.
yeah, ultimately value will always be an individual decision.
Of course, absolutely.
And
But
that's why I can't answer that guy's question because it's an individual decision. So for me, I made a decision that day at 7-2. I was playing and I won. So, I come back to it. Every winning bet is a value bet to the guy that's placed it.
okay, we've got time for just a few more questions here, and there's an overwhelming amount that fall into a couple of categories. Um, so the first category is about bookies really, and um, getting
Some
shut
of them are very
down.
nice people.
So you say. Um, no, it's
Yeah.
about getting shut down, and obviously they're limiting people much faster. I mean, if you've got some decent money on, you only need a few bets. So, are you finding that Betfair SP is the way to go, or if you can't get best odds guaranteed, is there any point betting with a bookmaker anymore?
Well, what I would say, Michael, is this, that I had a slide that said it in capital letters. Betfair, and they merged the two names there. Betfair and BetDAC are game changers. They have changed the betting landscape forever because here is a situation where you can have what you want on. Now, I hoped that when they came on the scene, that would herald a change in the bookmakers' attitudes. Sadly, it's not. But what I would say is there are so many bookmakers around now. We spoke the other day with the Betfan guys that we've got people like you win. We've got Nordic Bet. We've got all these Scandinavian firms coming into our market, wanting a piece of the British market. For God's sake, guys, get an account with every single one of them. And if they want to give you 20 quid free bets, take them. We know let's not be daft. We know it's an incentive to get you in. This clown shouting free bets on the Ladbroke adverts. Take the freebie, but see it for what it is, which is a lull. And if they max you out, you know, there's ways of getting around it. Open other accounts. Get as many accounts as you can. Don't think that I won't have that one with that bookie. Get one. Just get them all. But the exchanges will never shut you down. Remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, I mean, even taking commission into account, you can certainly, beat the bookies, and even in situations where you're not necessarily beating the bookies, you can still make profits on
You
Betfair
can. That's a good
after
point because
commission.
yeah, people talk about commission, but Betfair SP will often be SP. So then we negate our commission.
Exactly.
I mean, BetDAC will offer you a trial which beats 5%. Take it. Take it.
Excellent. And another before I just go on to this question, actually, I've just been told that 45 of the spaces have now gone. So if you look in your chat, there's a link straight there that you can click on if you're interested in Simon's service, and I have no doubt it's going to be absolutely some of the best selections going. Um, Going back to the other yeah, eminently most common question that I'm seeing here, uh, what software do you use? What ratings do you use? And do you use your own?
I create my own rating system. I work originally from race form, and then I factor in all the things that I've talked about, and I create a rating system. I probably spend 6 hours a day generating the PowerNap selections. The stable line gold guys are going to come in later, and these are guys that answer only to me, and basically are going to come in like these bets might be at kind of 1 o'clock for a race that's going to be at 3 o'clock. You know, we're talking like red hot inside info, so that will take care of itself. But the interesting thing about that is there's still a filter system because I've got the other guys. So, for instance, we had a trial the other day where we had a favourite from the Newmarket guy, and I was able to cross-reference with a guy from Lambourne who had the second favourite that horse wasn't fancied. So there's still almost a rating system within a system going to go on there. But in terms of general form reading, I have my own system, yeah, where I create a rating that's an individual thing, and then I'll look to race form. I'll look at my factors that I want in, and then I'll create a system. And the important thing is for any system, and I'm sure Michael will agree on this, is that what you do is you do it on your own and you do it on a blank sheet of paper. Then, once you've done it, you take that to odds checker or you take that to a bookmaker. And only then do you compare what you think about a race and what factors you brought in to what the bookmakers and what the market thinks. And only then, when you've decided and you've used your ratings, can you see whether you've got a horse that's 3-1 in your eyes, that they're showing 6-1. Because you've not been influenced by Ladbrokes, Corals, William Hills by then. So you take an individual system and then you put it into the market, and that's when we talk about betting horses that we can get 6-1 that we think we've got a 3-1 chance. Because if we get influenced by what everybody else thinks, it's not our view anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you need to stay away from
That isn't to
the
say what
majority.
anyone else thinks, and Ladbrokes and Corals and William Hills don't pay muppets to fix horse racing prices. They pay very, very clever guys. So their view is vitally important, but we've got to know when it differs from ours.
I mean,
That's how we create the mythical value, if you like.
so if you haven't got your own rating, what rating would you suggest people would use?
Well, I mean, I do have my own rating system. Do you mean, is there
Yeah,
a
but
thing on the market?
yeah, I mean, if someone doesn't, what kind of from the various free websites, I guess, like Racing Post, Timeform, which would you say is the best one for a rating, if any of
Um,
them at all, of course.
No, I wouldn't say any at all because I think that they're all of value, but I don't think that any of them stand the test of time until you apply certain other examples. So I wouldn't say that any of them in their entirety are enough to go on. In my view, others may disagree. I think they're all valuable, and I come back to it. We're looking at that like Poirot thing about a series of clues. They'll all give you clues. Race form is excellent for getting you on the right road, but to me, you have to then add in other things to get you to the destination.
Absolutely, I would say that's a very sound answer. Um, a couple of a question actually about stable line. Quite a few people are asking here is will the selections always be backs or will there be lays as well?
No, there will only be backs. There'll only be backs for a simple reason. I made that decision because the idea from these guys is that I want to know when horses are going to win. I want to know when everything's in place. I kind of like use the information that they're not to point me towards another horse. So what I don't want to do is start putting a layup and then it kind of not be value in the long term. I'm looking for winners, so this is a purely backing service. And as I say, every bet's going to be a max bet, so it's not going to be 2, 3, 4 a day. We're going to be 4 or 5 arrows at a target every week for these.
Okay, well we've got time for just a couple more questions. And we've got one here from Darren that I think it's a great question, and he says it's great to go on about the different things that we look at of form of a horse, and what's going on in the yards, but surely horses are odds on, because or obviously he Darren specifically here is focusing on the odds on horses, but I guess this would apply to any horse. They're the odds that they are because the bookies know exactly what they're going on about. So how do you compete with that?
Um, if there are 3 meetings on an average day, then if there are 6 races in each meeting, logic tells me there are 18 races that day. I might only try and beat them on 2 of that 18 races. So I will give them chance to be right 16 times out of 18 and me right 2 out of 18. So there's an old phrase that the bookies have to bet on every race, but I don't have to. So I look at it that I've only got to beat them every so often. They've got to beat me every time. So he's right, but no one's right all the time. And I'm looking for the times when they're a little bit out.
I think that's great. I think it's also important to point out that bookmakers, they're not actually trying to uh, well, they're not directly trying to predict the chance of a horse winning. What they're actually trying to do is they're trying to predict what the betting market as a whole is going to think the most
And on that,
likely horse
yeah,
is to win, because they're
and
making their money from every horse in the race. They have what is known as the over round, of course, and that's
exactly.
20% or whatever. So as long as they've got the bets spread properly across the different runners in the race, they're going to make 20% or whatever the over round is, whoever wins. So they're not actually so interested in whether a horse is going to win. They're more interested in who the betting public think is going to win.
And also, Michael, it's important to state, probably that I haven't so far and we haven't tonight, is that the guy who asked that question is presupposing that every single bookmaker in Odds Checker agrees. Now, if we look at the early shows, there can be a huge variable for what Ladbrokes think is going to happen and what Hills think is going to happen and what Coral Leisure and what Victor Chandler think is going to happen. So we're not talking about a bookie's view. We're talking about a market. Now, it might be that I think that Ladbrokes are well in with Nicky Henderson. Now, they might be even money on his horse in the big hurdle race. Now, Coral Leisure might not be in with Nicky Henderson, and they might go 6-4. So I can make an opinion, and I can factor in a bookmaker's opinion too. I can use an odds reader to help me. So there isn't a formula. There's only an SP. In the early market, we can get all sorts of things going on. So we mustn't think of a bookmaker view. We've got to think of a market which we can look at and analyze.
Absolutely. I mean, uh, absolutely. I don't think there's anything else that we can say around that. To be honest. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on now. I'm gonna take, a, a final question. Uh, for this evening, before we round up, and I think it's a question that's actually really important question that is very, very seldom asked. That is, how do you decide how much to take out of your betting bank, and when do you do that? Because it's very easy, of course, to get, you know, to just leave that money sitting in your betting account and never actually withdraw it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, that's a decision that really is to do with the individual. I mean, what you can do, I talked about profit targets, and I made a profit target when I decided to kind of go on this journey of £10,000, and it's not an unusual sum. It's not an unreasonable sum. It's an unusual sum as well. It's not an unreasonable sum. But 15 years ago, it was, it was a great thing. And I thought when I get to that amount, I'm going to draw that out, and I'm going to go back to the original bank. And that took me, best part of 18 months to get to. So that was a personal decision. Now, it may well be you say, I'm going to start this tomorrow, and on this date next year, I'm going to take out the profit and I'm going to go again with what I've got. That's not unreasonable. That's a decision that you need to make. No betting bank is finite, and it must have an end date. Otherwise, there's kind of no point to this because you've got to enjoy the money. So, a year, I would say. Or if you make a profit target that you want to make 5 grand, make 5 grand and take it out and have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very sound advice. And the way I do it myself is I actually um, take out a percentage of profit every month, once a month, essentially like a salary. So I simply do that. But while I was building up my bankroll, I would I would leave a higher percentage in, so I may only take out 10% of the profit each month in order to try and maximize the speed of growth.
I
Um,
mean, it
but
would depend on everyone's individual lives and needs that are outside of this game, wouldn't it, in a sense? So there's no point of saying a formula because it's not
there
going to
isn't one.
apply.
I think the important thing is though is that um, if you've done what Simon has said and what you should, you've got your separate betting bank, um, and you're managing your bankroll and you're monitoring your bets, and then actually at the end of a profitable month, I think it's quite important to take a little bit out. It doesn't even matter if it's 20 quid, buy a few beers. It's just the moral feeling of taking some of that profit out and spending it on something you enjoy, when it's there, can kind of really help you to kind of get through some of the more psychological hurdles that there are in long-term punting.
Yeah, and it reminds you of what we're doing this game for.
Exactly, exactly.
Mm.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we can't take any more questions, but Simon, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And if you want to get, there's still a few spaces left on Simon's new Stable Line Gold service. So if you want to grab one of them while it's available, head over to this website. If you've got any questions about it, then the Betfan team and Simon, of course, are waiting to kind of answer them for you at support.betfan.co.uk, and you can see that in the chat as well. Simon, as I say, thank you very much for coming along tonight and and being the first presenter on the Betfan live event evening.
A
Uh,
pleasure. I hope everyone's got something out of it, and thank you, Michael, as well, for hosting it so well.
Thank you very much. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening and for all your questions. It's been a great evening, and I hope that in the future we will be doing this again sometime soon. So thank you for joining in, and head over to www.stablelinegold.com if you want to grab a space on Simon's new service. So Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.